Greetings, Tony Mobley here, and we're back with a new Conversations with Tony Mobley. Tonight, we're having a conversation with youth and on mental health. Why are we here? We're here because life has provided me the opportunity to have real conversations with real people. First, I want to thank Mr. Lamel McMorris for our conversation last week. And I also want to thank the team behind Conversations with Tony Mobley. So that is what we tried to do. We tried to have real conversations with real people. Tonight, I am talking to educator Jessica Lopez-Barkl and three of her exceptional students, Kevin, Willa, and Tiaja. And I hope I got that right. And so we hope to help others with these conversations, but I need your help. Register on the website, conversationswithTonyMobley.com, for our Mukana chat, which is a chat that will let you vote your questions up and down. Ask your questions in Conversation with Tony Mobley Mukana chat. And if you like this conversation, past conversations, like and subscribe. Set that bell to all the notifications to be reminded of upcoming conversations. And so with that, we're going to go to Jessica. And I'm going to ask Jessica just to share a little bit about herself and her students, and if she can do the introduction of her students tonight before we go to the questions.
Great.
Hello, Jessica.
Hi. Am I being heard?
Yes, we can hear you. It's a little bit low, but keep going.
So I am the associate professor.
All right, hold on a second, Jessica. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and they're going to help you out with your sound. I'm going to ask. Okay, so Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Kevin. I graduated in August with the theater. And then Jess was one of my teachers, and she has helped a lot throughout COVID because it was a stressful time. Like just to start college normally, and then out of the blue, everything's online, and it's a weird process. But everything's going well now, and I'm glad things are getting better slowly. Things are still high, but like it's getting better.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here again tonight.
Thank you
and
for having
being
me.
willing to share. We're going to go to Willa next.
Okay. Hi, my name's Willana Burdick. People usually call me Willa because not a lot of people can say Willana. And I've been a student at Sullivan for about 2 or 3 years. I haven't finished my theater degree yet because I ran into some family issues that stopped me from going to school during the shutdown and everything. But working with Jess and being able to do theater still through all of that
I think
has really helped out a lot with that. With keeping some of the stress down of dealing with family issues.
Fantastic. Thank you. Tiaja.
Hi, my name is Tiaja Austin. I technically graduated also in August with a humanities degree, and I'm back at SUNY Sullivan to get my theater degree with Jessica.
Fantastic. And so we have the person who's responsible for bringing these bright young people to share with us tonight, Jessica Lopez-Barkl. Jessica, are you there?
You can't hear me. Yeah, sorry.
Maybe she can't hear us. So we're going to go to some of the questions, and then we hope maybe Jessica can do a restart. So the first question that I'm going to ask is, do you think the media impacts mental health? Okay.
So should we raise our hand?
Deja, go ahead.
Like, yeah, I was like, I was technically a media student before I just got my humanities degree. And I was like, now we have, cell phones and it's like social media. So I was like, it's even a bigger, like media encompasses a bigger part of our life than it ever has before. So it definitely impacts mental health in a lot of different fronts.
Okay. Anybody else want to jump on that? Okay. So okay. So Jessica Barkl Lopez.
Yeah.
Lopez-Barkl. Please
Yes.
share with us now.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you.
Oh, good. Sorry. I am the associate professor of theater and speech at SUNY Sullivan. I was hired in 2014 to start the theater program. And we are a small rural school. I am also in frame with my daughter, Zia Lopez, this evening because child positivity and raising a child and having a theater program in a rural area is difficult. They don't typically have daycare for people later in the evening, so the students you see in the frame have seen her in rehearsal, they have seen her around, and then during the pandemic she was in all of the shows. But we kept this theater program really quite alive during the pandemic, and a lot of people ask me why, and I said they needed it, I needed it, the household needed it, and whether or not it was the most intelligent thing to do or whether or not we had the best equipment, we figured it out. And even tonight we ended up doing that because not everything worked out the way we had planned, so we have some interesting setups going on here.
Jessica, I was just wondering, could you share a little bit about the stresses that you went through when you were trying to keep the theater program going during the pandemic? I know that we had an earlier conversation about a month back or maybe 6 weeks back, and you talked a little bit about that. For those who may not have had an opportunity to watch that exceptional episode on Talak's conversation, could you share a bit about that? Because you were a maestro of putting together things that sometimes didn't need to go together, but you made it work, and it was a fantastic experience. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think any theater person deals with the fact that they are an imaginary invalid. They are always threatening to die. It's always the first arts program cut is usually theater. So I definitely had that feeling in my throat all the time, that because there weren't that many students and because we were closed down, that they would just shut us down. So I thought my only weapon was to stay present. Kevin was one of those students. I started out with 9 in 2019 and I ended with 2. And Kevin is one of the ones that survived all the way through. And so we figured it out, we created ways to have the playbill online. We created ways to have students come pick up bins on my end of my driveway with their costumes and a microphone and a green screen and a ring light, or I would mail it to them. I called in favors from all over the world, my friends, to make the theater program look exciting. You know, and every time we just came up with something new, you know, we thought maybe a web series that are like top 10 lists for Shakespeare, because we always do a classic every year. And we do a contemporary. We would beg, borrow, and steal for the sound equipment and the cameras, and they weren't always the most up to date, but we figured it out. We did nobody auditioned for the musical. I wanted it just to be here in the theater, and we would film it. And so the weekend before we started rehearsal, I called in favors, and suddenly we were doing hybrid concurrent theater, which I'd never even heard of, but I was like, we'll figure it out. It'll happen. And then we'll have people make TikToks and I'll overlay them, because I saw that on a tutorial once on office hours. So we just figured it out. They laugh at me because I'm horrible at social media and a variety of other things, but they like to make fun of me.
Very cool. Very cool. Kevin, I'm just curious. Jessica talked about you being able to persevere. Can you talk about that experience?
Yeah. So around that time, I believe we were about to start our show, the first practice, and that same day of the practice, they told us that it was our last day, like to end the school, and that we would have to leave. And we were like, "Whoa, I can't believe this is happening!" Because that is happening here. Because you just hear in the news, and then to experience it is just something else. And then it was crazy to see like people leave because they couldn't handle like online, or it was just too much. So I ended up, it was only 2 people, but it was basically only 1. Because I was always there. I was always there. But yeah, it was definitely an experience to learn, because we were all learning like to use Zoom or the Google Meet and stuff like that. So it was very interesting, and it was pretty hard to get used to, because you get used to being in person and randomly you're online, and yeah, and this is like you can't communicate the same because you're like behind the screen and not there in person. And I personally I like to learn in person. I feel like I learn better in a way. Yeah,
Very
that was my
cool.
experience.
Thank you. Tasia, actually having finished, why did you decide? I know Jessica's a fantastic person, but aside from that, why did you decide to come back and work on your theater degree?
I was like, oh, just Jess. I was like, I don't know. I was like, because I technically with humanities, there we go. I was like, okay, I'll find something to say. I was like, technically with my humanities degree, you could take a lot of electives. And my first semester at the school, I was just like, I'll take an acting class. And then for extra credit, you could like, be a stagehand on a production. That one specifically was Angels in America. And then after that, I was like, oh, theater's kind of fun. Let me sign up for musical theater. That sounds like it could be a good time. And then from there, Jess was like, oh, you should keep on this momentum and like audition for my show. And then she got me, and then I was gotten. And then she has
Fantastic. Fantastic. So Willow, can you talk about some of the stresses that you've dealt with since you've been in the program?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot, I can tell you that. Right before we shut down, my mom had to get open heart surgery. So I was missing like a lot of school because she was in the hospital recovering. And then when she finally came home, I was like, okay, this is my chance. I'm going to catch up so I can pass the semester and I can graduate on time. And then I was like, no, you won't, because it's going to shut down. And then it was literally that week. Like, I came back to school on a Monday, and then by Thursday, it was like, we're getting an email in the middle of class that everyone has to leave because the school's shutting down. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, oh yeah, we're going to keep it up. We're going to keep up the mentality of we're going to catch up and we're going to graduate. And then being home every day, all day, constantly doing the same, like not being able to leave the house or see other people other than my family, I just lost all types of motivation to do any school work, and I stopped going to class. And then I had a meeting with Jess, and I was like, Jess, I'm not going to be able to do it. And it's like one of the very few times I remember crying in my life because I was so sad to be leaving her. And then she started crying, and then it made me cry even more. And she was like, do you still want to do the show? Do you still want to do shows? I was like, oh my God, please. I need something. I need anything.
I think that's I think we would say that that's very therapeutic that you were able to participate in the theater, even though there were some life transitioning things going on. So we're going to go back to. I have a question on. Tell me what you guys think is the definition of mental health. So what do you think it is?
I mean, for me, it's one of those things where if you have a disability that is physical, then people see it. And mental health is invisible most of the time. But your mental health can be just as debilitating and disabling as a physical disability or a cognitive disability. I watched students. I mean, Willa talking about herself crying makes me cry again, simply because I had never seen her cry before. She's always been the strongest one among them. And to watch her, I mean, there's things that students aren't going to share with you necessarily.
Right.
And, there's more to those stories, of course, which I'm privy to, and I'm not going to spill the beans or
Absolutely
or
not.
But it's one of those things where it's like, it's hard to watch your students become disabled from the things that are either out of their control or in someone else's control, and you watch their faces fall apart, and you can't do anything because they're two-dimensional. You can't hug them, and at the height of the pandemic we couldn't even touch them anyway, so all you do is watch them cry, or you watch them fall apart, and I think that was the hardest thing during the pandemic, is to see your students falling apart, and then they disappear. They just stop coming. They stop turning their camera on. Two of my students just basically ghosted me. I had invested so much of my time and love and energy in teaching, and then they just stopped even being around. I still don't know. I sent a video message to one of them once that said, I will always care for you. I will always be here. And when you come back, I'm here.
Thank you, Jessica, for sharing that. I was wondering if the students, do you have something else that you want to share regarding what you think people need to know about mental health, or what is mental health? Yes, Tiaja.
I was like, in the same vein, as soon as she said what she's saying, because I was supposed to graduate 2020, and the classes that I was taking, because I couldn't stay at the dorms, I had to do 3 classes online pre-COVID online, so it was like even worse online classes, because it's just like you have to teach yourself this stuff, and then you have to learn it, and then take a test on what you learned yourself, and it's a whole thing. So I was like, and that's when I realized that I need the structure of an in-person kind of class situation, because what happened was we had we went to KCACTF, which was like the last in-person thing I did before COVID. And so I like literally went home and was like, okay, we're going to start these classes or like finish these classes out. And then the momentum of how big the situation had gotten had really weighed heavily on me. And I dropped all of my classes. I kind of had a mental breakdown. That was it wasn't fun. I was like, because I realized that I do have a disability because of the situation. It like revealed to me that there's a certain way in which I learn, and once I wasn't able to do it the same way as I usually do, I wasn't up to snuff to do it that way. And then I eventually got back into it. But yeah, disability is something you don't notice it until it's like you reach a breaking point sometimes, and then it comes out.
Can you share some of the things that helped you?
I think the break helped. When I dropped when I was able to put everything down and step away and then come back to it when I was ready, that was helpful. Also, the change in how online, like a lot of people didn't like it because they went from in-person to online, but I went from in-person to choosing to do, because I had 3 classes left, online. But pre-COVID, online classes were just like, here's a whole bunch of, PDFs, teach yourself this stuff, and then, so I was like, but it was easier with Zoom, or because it was more like an in-person face-to-face more than previous online classes were, or probably continue to be. I don't know.
And I'm going to say that a lot of it probably had to do with who your teacher is, because we know that she is an exceptional person and she works real hard. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. So, I wonder, have you guys heard of what is the mental health first aid? Have you guys heard of that?
No.
No.
Okay, so we're going to put the link on YouTube so that later on you guys can look at it. But the web address is www.mentalhealthfirstaid.org. And so we want to share this with you. And so there's a caption on it, let's get real. Let's make mental health first aid common as CPR. And it has some really, really great information there. And so I want to encourage you to do that. So we're going to talk a little bit about what do you think about mindfulness? Are you familiar with that word?
Yeah.
Please share.
I mean, I've practiced yoga since I was 19 years old, so mindfulness is definitely a part of the practice. But it's funny to me to take it into the context. My child is competing with me. Mindfulness, there she is. But during COVID, we had to, the students know this who were here in person and were rehearsing at the theater, we had to have a card. We had to be in and out of the theater. We could only be in this space 2 days a week. So we had to be mindful of all of these things because there was no one who could help us. There was nobody on campus except for us at those times. And the one security guard, and he had to stay at his station. And he wasn't allowed to do anything to lock up until we left. So like we were alone. Normally there's like custodial, or there's division secretaries who could save you if you locked something out or you weren't around or if something was broken. You could call buildings and grounds, but we were alone. So we had to be very, very mindful of what equipment we were using. The students also had to take their costumes, their props, and everything back and forth every night in case somebody did get COVID, and then we were forced to go fully virtual. There would be no way of getting the equipment to them, so they had to keep it. So I would have to pack up all of my sound equipment, my switcher, the camera, all of the cables. If I missed one, I would be screwed. So there was a lot of mindfulness going on. But on top of that, that mindfulness made you way too hypervigilant, and you were kind of also in like trauma mode all the time. So it was funny for me to have this flip side of mindfulness.
So Jessica, I'm going to ask you, how did you, with you doing your yoga and having been a student of yoga, how did you bring that in so that it would be helpful to the students?
Well, I would say when I was virtual, I would try to remember to do a check-in so that we could be mindful and see how everyone is doing and know that sometimes people were not going to be their best selves, or none of us were. I tried to be honest with them and open about my own struggles so that they would feel. I mean, I was very frank. I know Tiaja knows this, like in Shakespeare, I'd be like, yeah, today's not a good day. I've not had a good day, but I'm glad to be here with all of you. Just so that mindfulness was like, we're not all going to be our best selves, and that's okay. And if I have to model that, that's fine. But sometimes I would have to remind myself at the theater, because everything was so mindful, hypervigilant mindful, I would forget to breathe. We had a time where I did have a blow up, and I came the next day and mindfully told everybody that was not my best self. I'm so sorry. I hope I had a trust bank with you that was better so that I can be forgiven, but this is not what I meant to do. And I will remind myself to go take a good walk before that ever happens again. But I always felt so rushed, like we had so much to do in that space that we did have. I had to direct differently. Like I had to tell them what we wanted to do. And then when we got there, we would do it. And I wanted to make sure we got it done because we only got to be in there, for a certain amount of hours, and then they would kick us out. So it was really hard to be a good mindful person, except for when we were virtual. I would try to slow down and breathe and do that better.
Very cool. Very cool. So, Tiaja, can you talk about some of the things that you did when you were performing? Were you taking deep breaths? Were you taking walks? What were you doing to get through the stresses, particularly of those last few courses that you were taking?
I'll say, I don't think I was that stressed online. For the shows, I feel like I had to worry about the less amount of stuff than like people that were on the scene had to worry about. The internet did stress me. I was like, a few times I would have to, for Spring Awakening, my internet was being really wonky then. So I would have to, before the show and rehearsals, unplug it and like reset it and restart it just in case, and then sometimes you'll be like, I don't know if anybody sees me, but I have to keep acting because it's like, if they can see me, then, so it was stressful, but like, it was also fun. So like, it also adds a little bit of fun to a humdrum day because everything outside of theater wasn't that great. I was like, so being able to do theater was fun.
Very cool. Thank you so much for that. Kevin, can you talk about some of the things that you did in order to sort of deal with the stresses and pressures that you had?
Well, what helped me a lot was acting. When I did the show, it was like I forget about like me and become like the person that was acting, and I felt like that was like a relief because I'm not in my shoes. I'm not being me. I'm being somebody else. And that's just I've always said this. I love acting. That's the reason why, because I get to be somebody else for a while, and it's just like, because sometimes like I could be very stressed, and it was stressful because everything online is just stressful, and then going to and not actually doing it online was kind of stressful, but it was like doing it in person, doing a show. It is a little stressful, but in a way, it's fun because you're surrounded by people that like doing it, and like you feel their energy, and then I put out the energy. It was a little weird not having an audience. Very weird not having an audience. We were just looking at cameras most of the time, so we wouldn't know if people were watching or not. But it was definitely an experience that I liked. And
Kevin, I think you brought up a good point. So I'm gonna take a little. I'm gonna steal this from you. So basically, what you said was that acting was good stress for you, and it also helps you unwind.
yeah.
And so that's very cool. So thank you for sharing that. Willow, do you want to talk about some of the? I know that you had a lot of stress that you were dealing with, and you've already shared a lot of it. But have you talked? I don't believe you said anything about how you were able um, to deal with that stress. What were the things that you did that helped you manage or deal with that stress?
So it was mostly being able to do theater work again. Because when I first met Jess, I was an early childhood major. I wasn't a theater major. And then I was just like helping out backstage, front of house stuff. And I was like, this is kind of something I could get into. I kind of like this, you know? It's like, it was like very relaxing for me to do tech work and be backstage and helping out any way that I could. So I was like, I really like this. So I switched majors. And then whenever I got stressed, Jess would message me and she's like, hey, I'm doing this show. You want to be in it? And I'm like, sure. What do you need? I tried acting for one show that we did, 2 shows that we did over Zoom. I was an actor in Lorca Eats Bullets, and I realized I didn't really like being on the stage. I didn't like the pressure that came with memorizing lines and being off book and building a character for this person. I like building something for this character, building a background for this character. I was like, yeah, I don't like that type of stress. That stress scares me. And then Jess was like, hey, we're doing Shakespeare in Isolation. I need another actor. You're going to be in 2 scenes. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't like that, but I've also discovered during this time that when something makes me uncomfortable, it makes me want to do it more so that way I can get it done and be comfortable again. Like it forces me to be better at it so that way I can make myself comfortable. And I discovered that acting in Shakespeare in Isolation. I was like, okay, I didn't like acting on stage, but acting in front of a camera, I hate even more. So I'm gonna be as good as I possibly can, so that I don't have to do it anymore.
You just did the same thing that Kevin did. You know, said that acting kind of helps you deal with the stress, and so it was good stress being able to be on stage and in front of that camera. So thank you so much for sharing that, Willa. We're going to take a little bit of a break right here, and we're going to share a video for those who are watching on mental health. And so that should be coming up pretty soon. And as we're waiting for that, okay, here we go.
You may not realize it, but these words, often used to describe someone with a mental health condition, can be very harmful. In a country where 1 in 5 people are affected by a mental health condition, it's time for all of us to step up and change the conversation. Just because someone's struggle isn't obvious on the outside doesn't mean they aren't hurting on the inside. We need to see the person, not the condition. Join with me, pledge to be stigma-free.
Okay. Any comments?
Well, it's interesting that you play that, which would be a nice transition to the fact that our entire season of 2021-2022 is on disability and disorder. Because I have an enormous belief that the stigma is the biggest problem. And also that a certain group of people get to tell the story. Like Tiaja and I have spent a lot of time in a car recently because she needs rides to their house, and we're also dealing with, and I'm not going to out Tiaja's, I don't get to tell their story, but you know, we're doing a play about autism right now, and we've talked a lot about how oftentimes autism is told from a white frame. And last week I was privy to a conference that was autism through an autistic spectrum. And it was awesome to hear people who have autism talk about their autism and be the experts about it. And we employed this year advisors on each of the productions for each of the disabilities or disorders that we are exploring. In the first one, we explored the queer spectrum and gender dysmorphia, which was considered a mental health condition all the way into the 70s. We had a former student who is transitioning, who was our advisor on that particular production. But we had people in the show who were all over the spectrum. And that was also through a Spanish lens, because it was a play written in the 17th century about a person who believed themselves to be a man, even though they were born as a woman. Our second show deals with autism, which strangely became hugely a part of my life last month. And to hear somebody last week say that being a person of color with autism is a danger hit me really hard. You know, my daughter is of mixed race, and to think that now the intersection of her gender and her race and her disability could make her seem dangerous in public scares me as a mother, you know. And I want to have those conversations, but I want to have them framed not from always a doctor's perspective. I think having a student of color tell us about what that experience is sometimes better than a book, better than a seminar. We will also be dealing with bipolar disorder and suicide and attempted suicide later in the season, and also neurofibromatosis, which is a disorder that doesn't have any plays written about it, but we have one that is a former student who has written it with her mother, and it inspired the season. So that stigma is huge to me. And the students that are here with me today know that and join me in that. But I also think the other stigma is who gets to talk about it in regards to their economic class. And as somebody who comes from generational poverty, and I know some people who are with me here today experience that as well on different levels, we also don't get to tell our story because the intersection often is like, well, that's because you grew up poor, so you didn't have those opportunities available to you. And it's so painful that those things became such a they were in your face when you teach at a rural community college with predominantly people from generational poverty, and suddenly I see them every day, and then they're slowly disappearing. And now I just say people are on their journey when they're not necessarily finished with their degree, because I don't want to say they didn't finish, because then they also get that, well, that's because you didn't try hard enough, and that's because, you know, there's always a reason that they give, and it has nothing to do with anything that anyone particularly is mindful of, if that makes sense.
Yes. Thank you, Jessica, so much for sharing that. I have a question that I'm going to ask the group. And so this is from a good friend of the show, Liberty White. She says, Jessica, how can we help as parents? What do we need / how can we support our educators?
Oof. I mean, by the time I received the students, and they want to be adults, they want to be treated as adults who get to make their own decisions. But as some of the people on the call know, they lived at home, or still do, and supporting their time and supporting maybe something that they don't necessarily see as a part of their culture in any way, shape, or form, I think means a lot to the student. I can't speak for them, but I know it means a lot to me that Kevin's mom came up to me and wanted to make hot chocolate for our show. And I thought, oh God, I want Guatemalan hot chocolate really bad. And and we're going to need it because it's cold outside. And that meant the world to me that
Yes.
she wanted to help, So not only seeing the shows, but offering volunteer help, and little things like hot cocoa mean a lot. But I think that students forget how to ask for help at this age. It's like they're like, I'm an adult, I don't need to ask for help. And having the parent at home say, hey, do you need help with something? And push a little more when they say no, because they're going to say no. Can I bring you dinner? We have a mom who brings in dinner for everybody during tech. That's huge, And I think the first year the child of that mom was like, Mom, you're embarrassing me. And I'm like, oh no, she's not. She needs to bring us dinner. She's not wrong.
Yeah, Jessica, as you were saying that, I was thinking that we get to a point in our lives where we think that we shouldn't ask for help. And I can tell you guys, as an old guy, and I'm an old guy, you never get to the point where you should be ashamed or embarrassed to ask for help. It's a part of life. And part of the reason I think that human beings are made the way that they are is that from time to time, they have to reach out to each other and ask for help. So thank you, Jessica, for reinforcing that notion of not being afraid to ask for help at any age. I think that, that's part of the learning process, understanding that no matter how old you are, you never quite figure it out. You may figure out better ways to do it, but, we never get to the point where we have it all together in a bag of chips. There's always something more to learn, and there's always going to be a need to engage with one another, whether it's in person or whether it's through a camera. And so we're going to go to the next question. So we did talk a little bit about how COVID-19 impacted the campus. I was just wondering, was there anything else in particular that you guys wanted to share about COVID-19 and how it impacted the campus life? If not, I do have a question. Have you guys heard about a friend of the show, Mr. Roscoe Jones, shared a story with us on Saturday at the Education Hour that University of North Carolina shut down for a day, and they called it Mental Health Day. And I was just wondering, had any of you heard about that?
No.
The reason why they did it was because there were a suicide attempt and attempted suicide in days of each other. And so we're going to share that
Wow.
link so you guys can go back and look at it. And I think that at this point it's also important for me to share that a good friend of mine, Carla Hawkins, was supposed to be on the show tonight. She was going to be our therapist on this conversation. And she was not able to be on the show tonight because a crisis that I can't really speak to happened. And because that crisis happened, she was not able to be with us tonight. And so I'm going to be honest and say I had several questions that were geared specifically for her because as a therapist and working with populations that one of my questions was going to be to speak to her, and this, I think speaks to young people. One of my questions was going to be talking to veterans who have come back from because she did major work with those who were coming back from overseas, veterans, and some of the mental health stresses that they experienced and things they saw. And she's still doing that same work. And so I just want us to be mindful of the fact that life goes on and we can't just separate, just like we can't separate physical sickness, we can't separate mental illness and then put it in a little box. So I'm going to go to a question from Talak Lopez Waterman. What practices do you put in place for keeping centered and calm?
Oh boy. I'll start. During the pandemic, I put up a little sign that said, "Did you wash something today? Did you hug your child? Did you go outside? Did you shower? Did you do something you wanted to do?" And I had to remind myself in order to stay centered because I was confused. And if I was really confused, because I was dealing with a lot of tech stuff that I didn't understand, I would do 20 push-ups if it was too cold to go outside for a walk. So in order to recenter or re-regulate myself, I had to come up with some things that worked because you couldn't leave. It was claustrophobic. It was crazy. I laughed when I saw Snoop Dogg in his car and he's playing the song Let It Go from Frozen. And I was like, I feel that. He's like, I'm just going to be here and just let it go. Sometimes you used to play this song. And I was like, oh my God, that guy's right. That is it.
Deja, what do you think about being centered?
I'll say I don't think about it too often until I fall apart. And then you're like, maybe I should have a plan of action if this happens again. But I think recently, I guess, getting in touch with your breathing is really important. Jess taught us in our class, your heartbeat is important. And sometimes that's a really good self-regulator. But for me, before that, it was just sleep. if any little bit of stress up, I'm gonna turn over and I'm gonna go to sleep. If you looked, I was like, if you saw my Fitbit, like, because it can tell you how much you slept. It aired me out all throughout the pandemic. It'll be like, you slept 0 hours this night. You slept 14 hours this one day. Are you a cat? And I was like, yeah, just during the pandemic. I'm a little better now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Willow, can you talk about being centered?
Yeah, before this pandemic, I can honestly say I never thought about being centered and giving myself time to relax and like reorganize myself. Never even it was never even a thing that needed to cross my head before. But during the pandemic, it got to a point where me and my brother, who were not close, not that close, we were just being like, we need to get out of the house. I'm tired of looking at my walls. We need to go do something. And we were just going
I think we lost you a little bit, but we're going to go to Kevin, and then we'll try to come back to you. Kevin, can you talk about being centered?
So almost like Willa said, after the pandemic, it was just for me to be less stressful. I would really focus on my breathing, and usually I like going outside because I feel like inside is just I'd rather be outside and feel the air, and then just going against you. So breathing in and then just feeling. I would just stand in the grass, and then just focus on myself and try to find myself and find my happy place, and try to ease the stress down before I go back to do it again. And if it doesn't work, I try to take a break and then try to distract myself with something else and then come back to it. But
Very cool. Willa, did you want to finish what you were saying? You broke up a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just during the pandemic, I realized that staying in the house wasn't as healthy as I thought it was. So me and my brother, we used to drive a lot. We'd go on sibling outings, as we call it. And we would go and visit my sister or just drive around town just to get out of the house.
Yeah, I understand that too. I understand the need to just get out and just get air and just experience different things. Thank you guys so much for that. How does stressful acts of pulling together a theater production interact with mental well-being?
I hate to be always the first person to speak, but in this instance, I would say there was an enormous feeling of we did it together despite all the things that went wrong. And so the group of people that I spent the past year from May 2020 until now, I trust them so much more than I have ever trusted students because we had to figure this out together. Willa just was my assistant director on a show that we did for the first time outdoors, and we simultaneously streamed it. And we had to figure all of that out in the middle of storms, in the middle of rain, and I never thought, I didn't freak out as much as I normally do when I don't have tech things because I was now like, okay, well, you're learning this with me. And I trust you now because we've done some crazy stuff the past year. So that's a weird feeling to be like the instructor who should know more. But at this point, it's the we're figuring all of this weird hybrid concurrent stuff together. So let's all be the experts.
Very cool. Very cool. Kevin, do you want to add anything to that?
Also, yeah, it's all mostly like it's working together that makes it like a little bit easier because did a lot of crazy things. Especially, I think I had to experience like what was the first? I think it was Lorca that we started using. That there was no audience or no.
Oh no, count part of new plays, buddy.
Oh, but that was online. It was online. Actually, being in person. I think it was our first time in person since COVID happened, and it was just
that was
it was a lot of work because we had to wear these duck masks and we had to keep them up the whole time, and we had a lot of choreography, so we would all be out of breath, but we would be laying down.
Go ahead, Will. I know you want to add more to that.
Oh my! It's just when Kevin brought it up, I just remember during Lorca there was a scene where we had to like run across the stage and be there. Like Nick would exit first, but I was the last person that leaves the stage, but I had to be right behind him by the time he stepped back out on stage. And I just remember running around the theater in this giant duck mask, and I'm like, I can't breathe. And then right after that, we're supposed to die, like we're supposed to get crushed by a giant arm, and I'm like, I can't scream if I'm still trying to catch my breath. It was just it was a trip.
Asia, do you want to add to that? Yeah, you're doing a lot of smiling as they were talking. So
I was like, I'm just a smiley person. I was like, I didn't, in this particular case, they didn't call on me until much later in the virtual online thing. I was like, but what were we talking about? What was the initial question?
the question was about the theater, and it was about the stressful of pulling together a theater production.
Oh, okay.
Intact,
okay. Then I can pull.
and your well-being in the midst of all of that.
I was like, well, I think it's a good amount of, it's like, yeah, what we said earlier about good stress, I guess. It's like, because it's funny because I remember I was talking to Jess recently and she was like, you have to be there for the new acting kids because you're like a veteran in this game. And I was like, I haven't been in that many shows, or like I haven't been actually acting that long. Like literally before COVID, I think I was in, I don't remember, one show. Well, I know the show that I was in, we even went to Cape Cod for, I was only in like that one, that was my first show. So I haven't been acting very long. So when we came back in person, and it's like, it's a whole different ball game than virtual, because I was kind of phoning it in virtually. I'm not going to lie. I was like, because it was different than being on stage or in front of an audience. And it shows you like how much work, like some people be like, oh, well, actors, they learn the lines, they do this, but there is so much that goes into it. Building a character. I build my characters through music, through playlists and stuff like that. Music always speaks to me more than other forms of things. So yeah, it was good stress. It was fun. And although the show was stressful in a lot of ways, there was a lot of running around and a hill that I could have died on. I was like,
Well, why do you say that?
I'm not exaggerating.
What was going on the hill?
I was like, I'm not exaggerating. I just didn't have a lot of time with the hill, and they put me in some gladiator shoes and was trying to tell me to run up this hill. But I got around it. I figured it out.
Okay.
I was like, but it's fun. I like theater.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. So, and our last question for tonight. You're speaking to the world. What do you want them to know about mental health? And this time, I'm going to call on you guys. So we're going to go with Tiaja.
So what should you know about mental health? you should take it a lot more seriously. I myself, when I was a kid, I was like, oh, I don't know if everybody's brains work the same way as mine, but I'm gonna ignore it. And I was like, and I'm not gonna say anything about it. And it's like, now you're 20 something and you're like, I should probably take the bookmark out and go figure out this mental health thing because it's important.
Thank you for that. Kevin.
I would say, like Teja, definitely focus on your mental health, especially during times right now. It's like, it is getting better in a way, but definitely take time to focus on yourself, because either the stress can take you down, and sometimes it has taken me down, and it's not a fun experience to be in, but definitely I would say take time to focus on yourself and really try to enjoy life, because we never know. Every day we never know if we're going to be alive or not. Every day is a new day, so I would say.
Okay, guys, thank you all so much. I really appreciate you all guys being here with me tonight. And we're going to actually we're actually going to go to our thanks. So I want to again thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with me tonight. And I want to start by saying I'm going to do my special thanks right now. So a special thanks to Kimberly Mobley, the Global Family and Friends, Alec Lindsay, and the Office Hours members, Cloud, Bedrock, LLC, DVE Store, Liminal Entertainment Technologies, Bytime, Video360.com, ApproveForLoan.com, Mr. Ken Jordan, Elms Park, Jonas Dattel, Aaron Husledge, Sherrock Cheetah, David Brady, Marcus Lee Folk, Richard Lavery, Chris Fenwick, Manolo Lozanzo, Jeffrey Powers, and Talak Lopez Waterman, the CWTM producer. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Conversations with Tony Mobley series will continue next week. My guest is Jason Sipe, an educator and video production producer. And so coming soon, we have more interesting people, educators, filmmakers, musicians, other creators, singers, songwriters, and more to come. We have interesting conversations with interesting people. Conversations with Tony Mobley engages in real conversations. Again, thank you all so much for being here. We will see you next week. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.